The smell of burning flesh filled my nostrils, a searing pain that whitewashed my vision. My sister-in-law had just pressed a hot iron to my face, all because I dared to stand up for my 7-year-old daughter. But what they didn't know was that I had a secret, a quiet plan that would make them regret ever crossing us. It started like any other Saturday afternoon. Mackenzie, my sweet 7-year-old, clutched 3 shopping bags against her chest like they were pure gold. Her brown eyes sparkled with sheer excitement over the lavender sundress we'd found on sale, the denim jacket with embroidered flowers, and those sparkly sneakers she'd been begging for all summer. "Mom, can I wear the dress tomorrow?" she asked, her voice brimming with hope. "Of course, sweetheart," I replied. "You'll look beautiful." That smile, that precious unburdened smile on her face, made every single dollar I carefully budgeted absolutely worth it. Being a dental hygienist meant I didn't have much room for splurges, but Mackenzie had outgrown nearly everything. She deserved to feel beautiful, to feel confident as she headed into 3rd grade. We were driving to Owen's parents' house, my in-laws Ruth and Gary. Owen was there, helping his dad fix their back deck. Their home was a sprawling 2-story colonial, the kind Ruth never let anyone forget cost them $500,000. Its pristine white exterior and manicured lawn were constant, painful reminders of the wealth gap between our families. Owen's sister, Vanessa, and her husband, Todd, lived just blocks away in a similarly impressive house. Their daughter, Felicity, enjoyed every advantage money could buy. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Vanessa's black SUV. My stomach instantly tightened. Family gatherings always put me on edge, but I tried to hide my discomfort from Mackenzie. She bounded out of the car, her shopping bags swinging like flags. Ruth opened the front door before we even reached the steps. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, not a strand out of place despite the August humidity. Her critical gaze swept over us. "Where did you guys go?" Her question wasn't curiosity, it was an accusation. "I went to get clothes for my daughter," I said, trying to keep my voice cheerful, hoping to deflect whatever was coming. "Show them to us right now." Ruth's command made Mackenzie freeze, her excitement vanishing, replaced by confusion. I forced a smile and nodded, following Ruth into the living room. Vanessa was lounging on the leather sectional, scrolling on her phone. Gary was buried in his newspaper. Owen, still outside, was completely oblivious. "Go ahead, open the bags," Ruth instructed, positioning herself between me and the hallway, like a guard blocking an escape. Mackenzie set the bags on the coffee table and carefully pulled out the lavender dress. The soft fabric, the tiny white flowers. She twirled in the dressing room mirror for 5 full minutes. Ruth's hand shot out. Faster than I could process, she snatched the dress, then the other bags, and dumped everything onto the floor. The denim jacket landed in a heap, the sneakers tumbled across the hardwood. "These don't belong on some ugly girl." Ruth's voice dripped with pure venom. Mackenzie's face crumpled. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she watched her grandmother gather every single item, march to the kitchen, and throw them into the trash can, pushing them deep beneath coffee grounds and vegetable scraps. The metallic clang of the lid closing felt like a door slamming on something precious. "Ruth, what the hell are you doing?" I moved towards the kitchen, but Vanessa stood up, blocking my path. "My mother can do whatever she wants in her own home. Maybe if you bought better quality items instead of clearance rack garbage, she wouldn't be so offended." Mackenzie sobbed harder, her small body shaking. I pulled her close, stroking her hair as rage built inside me, a volcano of pressure. Gary didn't even look up. Vanessa went back to her phone. Ruth washed her hands at the sink, as if touching my daughter's clothes had somehow contaminated her. Owen finally came inside, wiping sweat from his forehead. His smile died when he saw Mackenzie crying. "What happened?" he asked. "Your mother threw away all of Mackenzie's new clothes and called her ugly," I stated, watching his face, waiting to see which side he'd choose. Ruth turned from the sink, her expression morphing into wounded innocence. "I did no such thing. I simply suggested children don't need expensive designer clothes." She's being dramatic and teaching Mackenzie to be ungrateful. "They weren't expensive or designer," I said quietly, locking eyes with Owen. "They were from Target and Marshall's. She's been wearing the same 5 outfits all summer because she's grown 3 inches. Owen looked between his mother and me, conflict visible. Finally he sighed. "Mom, that was uncalled for. Those were Mackenzie's things. Don't you dare take her side against your own mother." Ruth snapped. "We've given you everything. Paid for your education. Helped with your down payment. Show some gratitude." The reminder of their financial leverage hung in the air like smoke. Owen's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. I gathered Mackenzie and walked out to the car, leaving my husband to make his own way home. The next few days passed in tense silence. Owen tried to apologize for his mother, suggesting we just forget about it. Mackenzie kept asking if we could get her clothes back, and each time, explaining they were gone made the light in her eyes dim a little more. Thursday evening Vanessa called. inviting us to family dinner on Saturday. Ruth had apparently decided to smooth things over with her famous pot roast. Owen accepted before I could object. Saturday arrived too quickly. I dressed Mackenzie in one of her old shirts, now showing her wrists, and shorts so faded they were a ghost of their original navy. Owen didn't comment, though guilt flickered across his face. Ruth's dining room table seated 12. Good china, crystal glasses, the works. Vanessa and Todd arrived with Felicity, who wore a sundress that made my breath catch in my throat. Lavender fabric, tiny white flowers along the hem, a small pocket on the side. Mackenzie's new dress. My daughter saw it at the same moment I did. Her fork clattered against her plate, sharp in the sudden silence. Tears welled in her eyes as she stared at her cousin, who twirled to show off the dress. "Mom, that was mine." Mackenzie's voice cracked with betrayal. Everyone froze. Ruth set down the serving spoon. Gary finally looked up from his plate. Todd shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa's expression hardened. "Mackenzie, honey," Owen said weakly. "I'm sure it's just a similar dress. But we all knew better. It's the exact same one. It even has a little stain near the pocket where I dropped ice cream." Mackenzie pointed with a trembling finger at a small brown spot I tried to scrub out before Ruth threw it away. I stood up slowly, placing my napkin on the table with deliberate care. "Ruth, did you take my daughter's clothes out of the trash and give them to Felicity?" "They were in the garbage, which means they were discarded," Ruth said, her chin defiant. "What I do with items in my own trash can is my business." Vanessa pushed back from the table. "You have a problem with that?" "Yes, I have a problem with you stealing from a 7-year-old child and then parading it in front of her like some kind of trophy. Those clothes are wasted on her anyway. Look at her. She's nothing special. Felicity actually has potential to be something. She deserves nice things." The words hung between us like poison gas. Mackenzie's sobs grew louder. Owen finally stood, but before he could speak, Vanessa moved toward the kitchen counter. Ruth had been pressing tablecloths earlier, and the iron still sat plugged in, steam rising from its metal surface. Everything happened in slow motion and at lightning speed simultaneously. Vanessa grabbed the iron, her face twisted with rage. She closed the distance between us before anyone could react. Before I could reply, she pressed it on my mouth, snarling, "Next time, keep your daughter's mouth shut." White-hot agony exploded across my lips and chin. The smell of burning flesh filled my nostrils. I stumbled backward, crashing into a chair. The pain was so intense I couldn't scream. My vision went white around the edges. Mackenzie's screams pierced through the roaring in my ears. Owen shouted something muffled, distant. My hand shook as I touched my face, feeling the raised, blistered skin where the iron had made contact. Vanessa stood, holding the iron like a weapon, her chest heaving. "Maybe now you'll think twice before causing trouble in this family." Ruth didn't move. Gary sat frozen. Todd grabbed Felicity and hustled her out of the room. Owen finally reached me, his hands hovering over my shoulders like he was afraid to touch me. I didn't cry. The tears wouldn't come. Trapped behind a wall of shock and rage that was rapidly crystallizing into something harder, sharper than diamonds. Through the haze of pain, clarity emerged. These people would never change. They would continue to abuse and demean us as long as we allowed it. "Owen, take Mackenzie to the car." My voice sounded strange, distorted by my swelling lips. "We need to get you to the hospital," he pleaded. "Car. Now." He gathered our daughter, still sobbing, and left. I stood alone, facing my in-laws and Vanessa, who had finally set down the iron. "You're all going to regret this," I said clearly despite the pain. "Every single one of you." Ruth laughed. Actually laughed. "Is that a threat? What exactly do you think you can do to us?" I didn't answer. I walked out of that house with my head held high, tasting blood and burned flesh, already planning my next moves. The emergency room doctor documented everything. Deep second-degree burns across my lower lip, chin, and part of my left cheek, the kind that would leave permanent scarring. The nurse took photographs. When the police officer arrived, I provided every detail with cold precision. Assault with a deadly weapon. I pressed charges without hesitation. Owen tried to convince me to reconsider during the drive home. She didn't mean it. She just lost her temper. "If you press charges, it's going to tear the family apart." "The family is already torn apart," I retorted, my words slightly slurred from the swelling. "They just hide it better than most. My parents will never forgive you." "Good. I don't want their forgiveness. I want them to suffer consequences for once in their privileged lives." The drive felt endless. Mackenzie had cried herself to sleep in the back seat. Every bump sent pain shooting through my face. Owen's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched tight. "You know what the worst part is?" I said. "This isn't the first time they've been cruel to her. It's just the first time they left physical evidence." Owen glanced at me. "What do you mean?" "Last Thanksgiving, when you were outside with your dad watching football, Ruth told Mackenzie that she'd never be as pretty as Felicity because she had my genes instead of good breeding. Mackenzie was only 5 years old. Owen. 5. His hands tightened further on the wheel. Why didn't you tell me? I did. You said your mother was just from a different generation and didn't mean anything by it. You told me to let it go because it wasn't worth causing family drama. Silence filled the car. The streetlights cast moving shadows across his face, and I could see the exact moment he realized how many times he'd chosen his parents over protecting his own child. There was the time Vanessa told Mackenzie she was lucky they even invited her to Felicity's birthday party, because they normally only invited popular kids. The Christmas when Gary said Mackenzie's homemade ornament wasn't good enough for their tree, throwing it away while she watched. The Easter egg hunt where Ruth hid all the good prizes in places only Felicity could reach, then laughed when Mackenzie cried about finding empty eggs. Jesus Christ, Owen's voice cracked. How did I not see this? You saw it. You just didn't want to believe your perfect family could be that hateful to a child. The bandages on my face made eating difficult, talking painful, sleeping nearly impossible. Mackenzie crawled into bed with me that night, careful not to bump my injuries. Mom, I'm sorry, she whispered. You have nothing to be sorry for, baby. None of this is your fault. Grandma and Aunt Vanessa hate me. They don't hate you, I explained. They're just broken people who try to make themselves feel bigger by making others feel small. But we're not going to let them win. Monday morning, I called in sick and drove downtown to meet with an attorney specializing in personal injury and family law. Derek Patterson listened to my story, taking meticulous notes, his expression growing darker with each detail. You have an excellent case for assault. The medical documentation, photographs, and witness statements from your husband and daughter will be compelling. The fact that she used a heated iron as a weapon demonstrates premeditation and intent to cause serious harm. I want more than just criminal charges, I told him. I want a restraining order against all three of them, Ruth, Gary, and Vanessa. I want them to understand there are real consequences for their actions. We can file for a protective order based on the assault and the ongoing harassment and emotional abuse. Document everything from here forward. Save text messages, emails, voicemails. Keep a detailed journal of any contact attempts or threatening behavior. I paid the retainer from my emergency savings account, money I'd been setting aside for exactly this kind of crisis, though I'd never imagined it would involve literal assault by my in-laws. Walking out of Derek's office, I felt something shift inside me. For years I'd been the peacekeeper, swallowing insults, forcing smiles. I convinced myself that maintaining harmony was worth the small indignities, the subtle cruelties. But there was nothing small about what they'd done to Mackenzie. Nothing subtle about a heated iron pressed against my face. My phone buzzed constantly over the next few days with unknown numbers. I suspected Ruth or Vanessa, trying to get around my block. I let every call go to voicemail. The messages ranged from fake apologies dripping with insincerity to outright threats. You're making a huge mistake. Ruth's voice hissed through the speaker on one recording. Gary knows people, important people. Lawyers, judges, police officers. You think you can come after this family and win? You're nobody. A dental hygienist married above her station. And you've forgotten your place. I saved every single message, forwarding them to Derek within minutes. Each threat, each attempt at intimidation, only strengthened my case and my resolve. By the way, if you're still hooked on this wild ride, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. **** On Wednesday, 3 days after the assault, I returned to work. My coworkers gasped when they saw my face. The bandages covered most of the damage, but bruising had spread across my left cheek in shades of purple and yellow. My supervisor, Angela, pulled me into her office immediately. What happened? Her eyes were wide with concern. I told her everything. Angela listened without interrupting. When I finished, she shook her head. I've met your mother-in-law. She came in for a cleaning last year, remember? Complained about everything, made our receptionist cry, and tried to get services for free because her son was married to one of our employees. I had forgotten about that. Ruth had been so awful that Angela had personally asked her not to return to the practice. Take the rest of the week off, paid, Angela said firmly. You need to focus on healing and dealing with the legal stuff. We'll manage. Her kindness nearly broke through the wall I'd built around my emotions. I thanked her and left before the tears could start. At home, Mackenzie was having nightmares. She'd wake up screaming about fires and people hurting her mommy. Owen sat with her for hours some nights, reading stories and singing lullabies until she fell back asleep. The guilt on his face was almost painful to witness. Thursday morning brought a knock at our door. A process server handed Owen papers. His parents were suing us for grandparent rights, claiming we were alienating them from their grandchild without justification. The audacity was breathtaking. They'd verbally abused Mackenzie, and one of them had assaulted me with a weapon, and now they were positioning themselves as victims. Derek assured me the lawsuit was baseless, likely to be dismissed, especially with the restraining order and pending criminal charges. But it showed how far Ruth and Gary would go to maintain control and avoid accountability. Friday afternoon, I was organizing my documentation when I found an old photo album I'd forgotten about. Pictures from our wedding 8 years ago, images of happier times, or at least times when I believed we were happy. There was Ruth in her expensive mother of the groom dress, smiling, but I could now see the coldness in her eyes. Vanessa as a bridesmaid, standing slightly apart from my friends as if being near them might contaminate her. I flipped through pages showing Mackenzie as a baby, toddler photos, birthday parties. In every picture that included Owen's family, I could now see what I'd missed before. The way Ruth held Mackenzie at arm's length, as if physical distance could protect her from whatever deficiency she believed my genes carried. The forced smiles that never reached Gary's eyes. Vanessa's barely concealed disdain whenever she had to interact with our daughter. How had I normalized this for so long? How had I convinced myself that their treatment was acceptable, that keeping peace with these people was worth the damage being done to my child's self-esteem? What are you looking at? Owen asked, finding me on the floor surrounded by photographs. The truth I spent 8 years ignoring. I held up a picture from Mackenzie's 3rd birthday. She was reaching for the cake Ruth had brought. A small store-bought cupcake compared to the elaborate 3-tier princess cake Felicity had received the month before. Your mother couldn't even be bothered to treat them equally on their birthdays. Owen sat down beside me. I remember this day. Mom said she didn't have time to order a fancy cake because she was too busy with her charity work. But she had time to order one for Felicity. He set the picture down gently. Yeah, I see it now. All of it. And I hate myself for not seeing it sooner. Hating yourself doesn't help, Owen. Doing better going forward does. We sat together in the wreckage of old memories, sorting through years of subtle abuse I'd documented without even realizing it. Each photograph told a story of favoritism, neglect, and calculated cruelty dressed up as family love. The police arrested Vanessa 2 days later at her home. The mugshot made the local news since Todd worked for a prominent law firm. Ruth hired the most expensive criminal defense attorney in the city, a shark named Malcolm Pritchard. But the evidence was overwhelming. Photographs of my burned face, the documented history of verbal abuse toward Mackenzie, and the testimony from 3 witnesses including Owen, who finally found his spine when questioned under oath. Owen's parents threatened to disown him if he testified against his sister. He stood in our bedroom, torn between the family who raised him and the family he created. What do you want me to do? He asked, looking lost and scared. I want you to tell the truth. I want you to protect your daughter from people who literally call her ugly to her face. I want you to be the man I thought I married instead of a coward who lets his mother throw away a child's clothes like garbage. He flinched at the harsh words but didn't argue. The truth had teeth, and sometimes teeth were necessary to bite through layers of denial and enabling. The restraining order was granted 10 days after the assault. Ruth, Gary, and Vanessa were prohibited from coming within 500 feet of Mackenzie, me, or our home. They were forbidden from contacting us directly or through third parties. A violation would result in immediate arrest. The day we received confirmation, I took Mackenzie out for ice cream. She needed to see that life could still hold simple joys. Mom, does this mean Grandma can't call me ugly anymore? She asked, chocolate ice cream smeared across her chin. She can't talk to you at all anymore, baby. And if she tries, the police will make sure she stops. Good. Mackenzie took another bite. I don't think I want a grandma who's mean anyway. My friend Taylor says her grandma bakes cookies and teaches her to knit. That's what grandmas are supposed to be like. You're right. That is what they're supposed to be like. We finished our ice cream in comfortable silence. That evening, Owen's brother Garrett called. He lived in California and had always kept his distance from the family drama. Mom called me, he said after brief pleasantries. She's telling everyone you attacked Vanessa and are making up lies about the whole family. Did she mention the second-degree burns on my face or the medical records documenting where Vanessa pressed a hot iron against my mouth? Silence. Then quietly, she said you accidentally burned yourself and blamed it on Vanessa out of spite. Your sister assaulted me with a weapon in front of 4 witnesses, including your brother and my 7-year-old daughter. The police have photographs, medical documentation, and witness statements. This isn't a case of he said, she said. It's documented fact. More silence. Finally, Garrett sighed. I believe you. Mom's been spinning stories my whole life, rewriting history to make herself look good. I moved across the country partly to get away from it. Then why are you calling? To warn you. She's not going to let this go quietly. She's already talking to everyone in her social circle, painting you as this vindictive monster destroying the family. She's good at playing the victim, and she has a lot of people who will believe her without question. Let them believe her. The courts will see the truth. Just be careful. When people like Mom get cornered, they get dangerous. I thanked him and ended the call. Owen had been listening from the kitchen doorway, his face pale. Garrett's right, he said. My mother will burn everything down rather than admit she was wrong. Then we'll rise from the ashes, I replied. We've already survived the worst she could do. Ruth lost her mind when served with the papers. She showed up at our house screaming that I poisoned her son, that I was a vindictive witch destroying their lives over an accident. The police arrested her for violating the restraining order within 6 hours of receiving it. She spent the night in jail, and Gary had to post bail. Vanessa's criminal trial lasted 3 days. Malcolm Pritchard, her expensive attorney, tried to paint me as unstable, vindictive, someone who'd provoked the attack. The prosecutor demolished that narrative with photographs, medical records, and testimony from Mackenzie's therapist about the emotional abuse my daughter had endured. Taking the stand was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Pritchard was skilled, asking questions designed to make me look petty. Isn't it true you've always been jealous of Mrs. Caldwell's success? He asked. No, that's not true. But you resented her wealth, didn't you? Her nice home, her successful business, the advantages she could provide her daughter. I resented the way she treated my child like she was worthless. Her money had nothing to do with it. He even insinuated I'd burned myself to frame Vanessa. The absurdity was almost laughable. When the prosecutor questioned me, she let me tell the story in my own words. I described Mackenzie's excitement, Ruth's casual cruelty, my daughter's heartbreak, the confrontation, and then the iron. Did you defend yourself? The prosecutor asked. I didn't have time. It happened so fast. 1 second I was standing there. The next there was burning pain and I couldn't see straight. What did you think in that moment? I thought I was going to die, that she'd actually killed me in front of my daughter, and that would be Mackenzie's last memory of me. Several jurors looked visibly affected. Mackenzie didn't have to testify. Her recorded statement with the child advocate was played instead. Hearing her small voice describe what she'd witnessed, the fear and confusion, nearly destroyed my composure. Owen sat in the gallery, tears streaming down his face. The defense called Ruth as a character witness for Vanessa. She took the stand, perfectly styled, playing the concerned mother. My daughter would never do something like this. She's been under tremendous stress, and this woman has been making her life difficult for years. The prosecutor's cross-examination was surgical. Mrs. Patterson, do you recall calling your granddaughter ugly on the night of August 12th? I never said such a thing. You didn't say, and I quote, "These don't belong on some ugly girl," while throwing your granddaughter's clothes in the trash? That's taken out of context. I was speaking about the quality of the clothes, not the child. So you did throw your granddaughter's clothes in the trash? Ruth's composure slipped. They were inappropriate. Too mature for a child her age. The lavender dress with flowers was too mature for a 7-year-old? I was making a parenting decision that her mother apparently isn't capable of making. Mrs. Patterson, you're not Mackenzie's parent, are you? No. But someone needs to provide guidance when... Yes or no, please. You are not her parent. No. And you've previously violated the restraining order that prohibits contact with the child you claim to love so much, haven't you? Ruth's face flushed red. Pritchard objected, but the damage was done. Ruth stepped down from the stand, her image thoroughly dismantled. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty of assault with a deadly weapon causing serious bodily injury, the judge sentenced Vanessa to 3 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 months. Pritchard immediately filed for appeal, but Vanessa was remanded into custody that same day. She also received a permanent restraining order preventing contact with Mackenzie or me for 10 years. Todd filed for divorce 6 weeks later. Being married to a convicted felon, who attacked a family member with a hot iron, wasn't the image he wanted for his legal career. Felicity went to live with Todd's parents, and Vanessa lost primary custody while serving her sentence. But the letter I mentioned, the one that came 2 weeks after the assault, before the trial date was even set, before Vanessa's conviction made the news, I'd been busy during those 14 days beyond just meeting with attorneys and pressing charges. I'd also contacted the IRS. During years of family dinners, Ruth had been remarkably indiscreet about certain financial matters after a few glasses of wine. She bragged about Gary's rental properties managed through cash payments. No pesky tax reporting. She'd laughed about Vanessa using business accounts to write off personal expenses, vacations disguised as business trips, the whole SUV claimed as a company vehicle despite being used exclusively for personal errands. I'd been keeping notes for years, filing away comments and details in the back of my mind. Now I compiled everything into a detailed report, complete with dates, property addresses, and business names. I submitted it anonymously through the IRS whistleblower program. The letter that arrived 2 weeks later came from the Internal Revenue Service, informing Gary and Ruth that their tax returns for the past 7 years were being audited. A second letter arrived at Vanessa's business address the same day. Ruth called Owen from a number I didn't recognize, hysterical and screaming about the audit, demanding to know if I'd had anything to do with it. Owen honestly didn't know, as I'd kept that particular revenge plot to myself. The restraining order prevented direct contact, but she left a voicemail that was later used as evidence of continued harassment. The IRS investigation uncovered exactly what I'd reported, and more. Unreported rental income totaling over $400,000 across 7 years. Tax evasion through fraudulent deductions. False business deductions exceeding $150,000. Vanessa's company faced similar findings, with the added complication that she'd been falsifying invoices and inflating expenses. The financial penalties were devastating. Gary and Ruth owed back taxes plus penalties totaling close to $200,000. Vanessa's business folded entirely under the weight of fines and back taxes. They had to sell 2 of their rental properties just to cover the initial payments. The beautiful colonial house where Ruth had thrown away my daughter's clothes went on the market within 6 months. They downsized to a modest ranch house in a middle-class neighborhood, the same kind of neighborhood they'd always looked down on people like me for living in. Vanessa emerged from prison divorced, partially estranged from her daughter, homeless and bankrupt. She moved in with her parents in their reduced circumstances. All 3 of them crammed into a space that would have horrified them 2 years earlier. Owen and I attended marriage counseling. He'd finally recognized how toxic his family's influence had been, how he'd enabled their abuse by staying silent and choosing the path of least resistance. The work was hard, painful, and sometimes I wasn't sure we'd make it. But he showed up, did the work, and slowly rebuilt the trust he'd shattered. Mackenzie also saw a therapist specializing in childhood trauma. The sessions helped her understand that the cruelty she'd experienced said everything about her grandmother and aunt, and nothing about her worth or beauty. We replaced the clothes that had been stolen, and I let her pick out whatever she wanted within reason. The joy on her face when she wore the new lavender dress she'd chosen made my scarred mouth smile despite the tightness of the burned tissue. The scars on my face faded somewhat over time, though I'd always carry the marks of what Vanessa had done. Sometimes people stared or asked questions. I told them the truth without shame or hesitation. I was assaulted by my sister-in-law with a hot iron because I dared to stand up to my abusive in-laws. Ruth tried reaching out through mutual acquaintances several times, claiming she wanted to apologize and reconcile. Each attempt violated the restraining order by using intermediaries, and resulted in further legal consequences. She seemed genuinely unable to grasp that actions had consequences, that burning bridges sometimes left you stranded on the wrong side of the river. 3 years after that terrible Saturday dinner, Mackenzie came home from school excited about an art project. She'd drawn a picture of our family, just the 3 of us standing in front of our house with our dog Biscuit. The sun shone bright yellow, flowers bloomed, and everyone smiled. "Where's Grandma and Grandpa?" Owen asked, noticing their absence. Mackenzie shrugged. "They're not really our family anymore. Family doesn't hurt you on purpose and then act like you're wrong for being sad about it." Out of the mouths of 10-year-olds came wisdom that some adults spent lifetimes avoiding. Owen's eyes filled with tears, and he pulled our daughter into a tight hug. "Sometimes people ask if I regret how hard I went after my in-laws. If the revenge was worth the permanent family rift and the scars I carry forever." I think about Mackenzie that day, crying over clothes that should have been hers, listening to her grandmother call her ugly, watching the adults who should have protected her either participate in the cruelty or stand by silently. Then I remember the iron's heat against my skin, Vanessa's rage-filled eyes, and the complete lack of remorse from any of them in that moment. I remember years of subtle digs and not-so-subtle insults, of watching my daughter's confidence erode under constant criticism, of being made to feel less than because I didn't come from money or fit their narrow definition of acceptable. No, I don't regret it at all. They thought I was weak because I tolerated their abuse for so long. They mistook patience for powerlessness, silence for stupidity. They believed their money and social status made them untouchable, that they could hurt a child without consequences because they'd always operated without consequences before. I taught them differently, not with screaming or crying or begging them to see my humanity, but with documentation, legal action, and their own arrogant words used against them in courts of law. The best revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it arrives in a plain envelope from the IRS, in court documents that can't be ignored, in the quiet satisfaction of watching bullies finally face the consequences they've spent lifetimes avoiding. Mackenzie is confident now, thriving in middle school, surrounded by real friends who build her up instead of tearing her down. She knows her worth isn't determined by cruel people's opinions. She knows that standing up for yourself isn't wrong, even when the people hurting you are family. Owen learned that blood doesn't excuse abuse, that being a good son sometimes means being a better father and husband. He cut contact with his parents entirely after Ruth's 3rd violation of the restraining order, choosing us over them without hesitation. As for Ruth, Gary, and Vanessa, they live cramped together in bitterness and reduced circumstances, blaming me for consequences they brought on themselves. Sometimes I drive past their new neighborhood on the way to Mackenzie's soccer games. The houses are smaller, the cars older, the yards less pristine than the life they used to know. I don't feel pity. I feel peace because every time I see Mackenzie laugh freely, dance without self-consciousness, or stand up for a friend being bullied, I know I made the right choice. I showed her that you don't have to accept abuse from anyone, that you can fight back legally and effectively, that justice sometimes takes time, but is worth pursuing. The scars on my face serve as a reminder not of victimhood, but of survival. Of the moment I stopped accepting cruelty as the price of keeping peace. Of the day I chose my daughter's well-being over toxic family dynamics. They almost fainted when they received that letter from the IRS. But I hadn't fainted when Vanessa pressed burning metal into my flesh. I stood, I fought, and I won. That's what I want my daughter to remember. Not the pain, not the cruelty, but the strength to fight back when someone tries to break you. They threw away clothes that belonged to a child. I threw away tolerance for abuse. And I'd make that trade every single time. I've shared my story, my fight for my family. Now I'm curious. What would you have done in my shoes? Or have you ever had to stand up to toxic family members and cut ties? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one.